This is MetroSource Minis, the official podcast of MetroSource Magazine and home of short-form interviews with your favorite personalities from the LGBTQ world and beyond. Quick, fun, and informative. It's MetroSource on the go. Out and proud since 1990.
Out and proud since 1990.
Hello. This is MetroSource Minis. I'm your host, Alexander Rodriguez. Betty spells Betty, the band that should be your official soundtrack to Pride season. Betty is the original pop rock band fronted by Allison Palmer and sisters Elizabeth and Amy Ziff, who have played Pride since the mid-'80s when nobody else would take the stage. They are pioneers, honey. Unstoppable activists, the women of Betty use their music for humanitarian outreach, working for equal rights, peace and aid, and the empowerment of girls and women. Since forming in 1986, they are most proud about being part of many hundreds of events that have improved lives, helped change policy, and raised millions of dollars for worthy causes, research, and people in need. Named Arts Envoys in 2012, the trio works with the U.S. State Department internationally in cultural diplomacy, and their music has been featured on national and international radio, television on the series Weeds, NBC's Love Bites, Ugly Betty, and of course the theme song for The L Word and more. Films, commercials, jingles, web projects, as guests on recordings, compilation albums, and in live theater, including the smash off-Broadway hit Betty Rules and They Do Girl. Representing Betty, you better capitalize it, is vocalist and guitarist Elizabeth Ziff. And a little disclaimer, this interview will not be PC. Hello, Elizabeth.
You know what? Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Shouldn't I be a lot more wealthy than I am?
Should we all be more wealthy? Girl, quarantine looks good on you. I hear the birds chirping and you're outside. You're just enjoying the rain.
You know what, honey? I was in New York City for the last 3 months, and then and I was by myself. But I have a studio in my apartment, so I was recording music and eating a lot, and masturbating wildly for a long time, and then. And that was pretty much my quarantine. Wait, should I turn myself sideways? Is that better?
No. You're good.
Okay. And anyway, so that's what I was doing. And now I took a break and I'm up visiting my sister because it was my niece's first birthday. So
happy first birthday. Happy first
Thank
birthday.
you.
So I want to know how in the hell was Betty formed? Like how did you guys become Betty?
Oh, Queen, please, really? That question?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. No, you know what? If you listen to our podcast, Betty Girl Band, the podcast, we explain it all. But Amy and I are sisters. So we've been together, obviously she's 30, 40 years older than I am. But we've still been in the same band together. And she's going to kill me when she hears this. So we were playing together and we were at my... living in my parents' house because we were still really basically embryos, and we decided to start a band, and we put an ad on the radio, and at the time it was an all-girl punk band, and I guess this is 1981, and probably before most of the people watching this were born, and so we put an ad on the radio, WHFS. We were living outside of DC at the time, and we advertised for a female bass player, and Allison was listening to the radio, and she was in some 50s band that she sort of liked and sort of hated. And then she heard the ad. She came to my parents' house for the audition, right? And she stepped out of the car, and first of all, she's so incredibly gorgeous.
Beautiful.
And, just like stunning. And she's so kind and wonderful, and she just radiates warmth, and she's just everything basically. And I'm not in love with her, but I am in love with her, not in a sexual way, but just like as soon as we saw each other, we all knew that we'd been in like many lives together and that we were born to play music together. So she started singing and played the bass, and we just started singing harmony right away. And then she left and came back the next night, and it was when it was just Amy and myself, and we just stayed up all night long laughing about what we were going to name the band, like All the Flies in China and A Double Dutch Bus. I mean, just really laughing. And I don't think drugs were involved actually, because we were really young. And then like the next week we said, you're in the band. The next week she helped us move into DC. So we lived in a group house in northeast DC. At the time it was a very, it was predominantly Black neighborhood, lower income, and everybody just welcomed us, even though we were, two white Jews from Virginia, because we were such freaks, and we played music, and the whole vibe there was really good. And then crack was introduced to the neighborhood, and there was all these rumors that it was brought in by Reagan and Noriega. They got together and they introduced crack to keep people in lower incomes down more. Because when you go into a lower income housing place, there's always, what is there always? There's always liquor stores, right? And at that time, crack was on every corner. And this guy who dealt on our corner, his name was Killer, for good reason, but we got to be friends with him. But it got really scary and really dangerous really quickly, and not because of the neighborhood, but because of the drugs. And crack was really deep. I don't know if you remember that. You might be too young, honey. But when crack came in, I know. When crack came in, yeah, and crack was just crazy. And so we ended up having to move out of that neighborhood. But that was our first band house. And it was great. The women of the neighborhood protected us, and we played music, and everybody came over, and people hung out and listened to music. And it was a really interesting time to be in DC, because white people and Black people, especially in the underground music scene, really got together. Like, there was the go-go music scene, which was predominantly African American, and then the white scene, which was like Minor Threat and hardcore music, and then the new wave scene, which we were in between all of them. And because we're interracial, and because we were like queer and lesbians and straight, and we played all different kinds of music, not just one kind. So this is after our punk band imploded. And it was just an exciting time to be there, because there was Reagan. So there was all this underbelly of resisting, and there was so much protesting. And, that was the time of the big gay marches and pro-choice marches in DC. And, that's why it's really exciting and interesting right now to see what's happened with the pandemic, combined with this atrocious monster and leadership, quote unquote, leadership that we have. It's like the perfect storm. And it's really great to see it happening, I have to say, as an activist and as a musician, and as an anti-racist person who tries as hard as I can be in a white, in this white skin, to try to be anti-racist in this country that is so fucking racist, right? It's like,
yeah.
But I mean, you obviously, as a queer Latinx, you're gonna run into all that shit. So I'm not telling you anything new, but it's nice to see the progression, and then the backspacing, and then the progression again in this country. And that's really how we've had progressive things happen in America. You're 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, with feminism, with gay rights, with racism. I mean, we've got a long way to go, but it's nice to see that people are really angry and taking to the streets. And I don't know if that would have happened without the pandemic.
Well, and that's very true. And also, there's a younger generation that is now, they're used to going to the clubs. I know in the West Hollywood city, they're used to going to the clubs on the weekend, and that's the extent of their LGBT activism, so to speak. And now they're becoming learned on politics and how politics works, and they're having a voice, and they're getting angry about politics, which I think is so important, because I think we were kind of being glossy, I know, in Southern California in a very safe environment. And now we realize, there's still a lot to fight for, and we're not as selfish anymore. This pride, we're thinking about other minority groups, which I think is so important. And I want to know, did you guys make the conscious decision to be like, what, we're going to be an openly gay with an ally kind of band and play at gay events? Do you think that was limiting in terms of overall visibility in any way?
Well, it probably was, definitely in the early and mid 80s when we first started playing at Prides, but we never made a conscious decision. We've always done what felt right to us. And because in the early and mid and late 80s, we had so many friends that were dying from AIDS. So of course we were going to play a gay pride, because it was much more politicized, and a lot of people wouldn't play because I remember we went up to have a meeting with the head of Epic Records at the time. And he said to us, you're not going to get signed if you continue to play at gay events and work and do things about AIDS, because you're going to be blacklisted and people aren't going to want to sign you. And that was the first time we'd ever heard anything really negative about it, because we were in this bubble of, the gay and the feminist world, and we were super young, so we didn't think anything like that could happen. We knew that being feminists, that was a big strike against us in the music world at the time, especially the pop music world. But we didn't realize how homophobic the music industry really was until that moment. And we just sort of looked at each other and went like that, and we weren't going to stop playing at prides and things like that. That, first of all, the gay audience is an audience that stays with you forever. Gay and lesbian and transgender audience, if has always been like that since the days of Judy Garland or before that. If we love you, and I'm including myself because I'm a lesbian gay man inside of this lesbian body. If I love something or someone and they continue to support me and what I believe in, I'll follow them off a cliff, and I think that's what the LGBTQ community does. So why would we stop performing for people that wanted us to perform and that we wanted to perform for, and that we were a part of that community? So that never made sense to us. And yeah, it probably did stop us from getting signed to a major label and at the time and things like that. But I mean, we're still here, and the music industry basically died or committed suicide. I mean, it's still there in a different way, but there's a much more independent arts. It's people don't really buy albums or CDs anymore. It's all digital. Yeah. So it's interesting what's happened. I think it's exciting and change. I think change, not that it's always good, but I think if you're true to yourselves and support, even if it's not in fashion, and you support causes and people that you believe in, then how can that be a bad thing ever? I grew up thinking that. With my parents were activists. Allison's dad was an ambassador, and he was in the second wave of Black ambassadorships. Very few Black ambassadors were appointed, and he was one of them. So, we grew up sort of being the outsiders anyway. So it made sense to continue to be outsiders, and who gave a fuck? I didn't give a fuck. Like, whatever. As long as I was getting laid, I had enough to drink, and I could play music, I was fine.
Well, you're a few steps ahead of me on that one. Now, what are you guys' thought? Since you've been involved, Pride was such a grassroots kind of festival and an experience. What's your take? And you and I shared the stage at Palm Springs Pride this last year.
That was
and
fun.
It was a huge stage and lights, and it was very, it was very well put together. TLC was one of the headliners. But what do you guys think about Pride becoming more commercial, bringing in mainstream pop singers to take the main stage? Do you guys have a little bit of resentment on that, or are you grateful for that, or what's your take on that?
I don't have resentment. I think anyone that supports the gay community deserves to play. I think if you're supporting the gay community, and always have, or there's a difference between supporting the gay community and be embraced by it, and then taking advantage of the gay community when you haven't really played prides your whole career, and then suddenly you decide you're going to play prides now because it's an audience and they want you and they'll pay you, a lot of money at times. I think, I don't know. It's an interesting question, because I think when people come around to the fact that they realize that it's important to support LGBTQ community, then play on, sister. Let them play. I think it's great, and I think that it's important for people who come to Pride, because a lot of people who come to Pride are allies and straight people and politicians and all of that. And when they come, to be entertained, but not to overlook the people, the up and coming queer artists, trans artists, people who aren't necessarily well known but are a part of their community. I think it's important to have a really nice balance between the new up and coming, the people who've been around forever, and the people who are quote unquote famous, you know. So, and I think that's what a lot of the prides are now, especially internationally. I know that because we play a lot of international prides.
Yeah. You ladies are activists. Betty represents gay, lesbian, which is the same thing in my opinion, people of color. But how do you think the LGBT community can best support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I think we can best support it by listening, especially if we're people who are born to privilege in our skin color or in our financial demeanor. I think we need to listen to people of color. If we're in a room of people of color, then we don't talk, we listen. And if we're in a room of people who are white, then we speak with the voice of what we've heard in the rooms of people of color. And that really has to happen much more. We have to really become intersectional in the true sense of all of us seeking out places that make us uncomfortable and seeking out situations that we can share and grow and have true equality among ourselves in the queer community. Because I think that, you know, we do have a lot of prejudices in the gay community, in the queer community, because we live in a prejudiced country, we live in a racist country, and how can you not be racist in one way or another? And that goes in all directions. So I think if we listen and if we understand that the people of color in the queer community have a much more difficult time, and not only are they sabotaged in their life by being queer, but on top of that, it's people, you know, they've been sabotaged since they were born in a country that deems them as less. So we, as the queer community, as the LGBTQ community, need to come together and elevate the people of color in our community and protect them and work together and listen to what they need and what they haven't gotten.
And what I love about what's happening, well, it's scary and I love it as well. I love that people are being called out on the racism. You know, I guess I wasn't as aware of how much racism was in my own community until I actually thought about it. And I was like, yeah, you go after that racist person posting that. And then I had to self-reflect and think about, you know, offhanded comments I've made that come from a very non-malicious place, but now have a different weight and meaning. Now you have to think about everything that you're saying, which at first I'm like, well, you know, I'm a funny guy. I shouldn't have to be politically correct. But now we're holding ourselves to a different requirement, and we are becoming more self-aware, and we're having to monitor what we say. And it's not just monitoring what we say, and it's thinking about the intent and what actually we're saying. It's not just a joke anymore. You know, there's intent behind everything, and now we're being held accountable, which I love. But it's scary too.
But I think what's important, honey, is that we're holding ourselves accountable.
Yes.
You know, because I think that's when real change happens. You know, when you do look at yourself and it's like, oh, where did I learn that phrase? And where did it actually come from? And why am I repeating it again? And why am I like continuing this culture of racism? But the exciting thing too is that once people are awoken to the difference, the incredible, intense racism that we have in this country, they also start to realize how unbelievably misogynist it is. And I think those two go hand in hand. And I hope that that awakening in America does coincide with the freedom of women as well, like passing the Equal Rights Amendment and things like that. Because, you know, if you have the gay marriage, if you have marriage between two women and two men, the two women are not protected under the Constitution. So you can be married and be gay and a woman, but you're not really protected because we don't have the Equal Rights Amendment yet. So that's an interesting thing to talk about that most people don't know. Most people already assume that women are in the Constitution, and we're not. We're not protected by the law. So that's something that's got to change. We got a lot of changing to do in this country, girl. A lot.
Yeah, we do. And I'm glad that the fire's starting, but we have a long way to go. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Do you want to play a little rapid fire with me?
Sure.
Okay. Who is the biggest diva of Betty?
Amy.
Okay. Have you hooked up with a fan after a show?
Many times.
Oh, girl, you work it. Worst onstage mishap.
Well, I fell flat on my face going out on stage, flat on my face, and then I just crawled to the microphone and pretended like nothing happened. No, but I've jumped off the stage and stage dive with my guitar at like San Diego Pride with huge people, huge audiences, and they parted, and I fell on my guitar and my face. I dislocated my shoulder.
Oh my God.
Lots of stuff. But that's rock and roll, girl.
Who would play you in the movie version of Betty?
Gal Gadot.
Uh-oh. She is sexy on any side of the fence.
I love her so much.
Yeah.
I love Gal Gadot. Gal, if you're watching, please call me. I love you so much.
I think she has a restraining order out against you.
Probably.
Who is your guilty pleasure artist, or what's your guilty pleasure song that you absolutely love, but is like, what?
Having My Baby. I was DJing for my sister and her wife were having a kid. So they had this really outrageous baby shower. And so I DJ'd, and every single song had to have baby or something in it. And then when I started playing Having My Baby, what you say how much I love you, I realized I hate the song yet. I love it so much. And then I played it over and over and over. So that is a sadly guilty pleasure, because also don't get me started on the whole baby thing and all the lesbians having babies, please.
All right, Elizabeth, tell everybody where they can find, follow, and listen to Betty.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me on your show, because I actually love your show. When I did it live when I was in LA that one time. I love you. I think you're fabulous. And they can find us by hellobetty.com, like Hello Kitty. And we're on Instagram at Bettyverse, and Bettyverse on Facebook, verse like universe, VRSE. We have a podcast, blah, blah, blah. You can just go to hellobetty.com, but really just talk to Alex, because he's way more interesting than we are.
Not true. All right, that has been Elizabeth Ziff, live from quarantine for Betty, and that's our episode. I'm your host and lead writer for MetroSource, Alexander Rodriguez. You can follow me on Instagram at AlexanderIsOnAir. You can binge listen to all of our MetroSource minis featuring all of your favorite celebs from our issues at metrosource.com. Until next time, stay true, stay you, boo. All right?
That has been another MetroSource Mini. Like, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast player, and check out the latest issue of MetroSource magazine on newsstands or online at metrosource.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram at MetroSource, and on Twitter at MetroSourceMag. Until next time, stay fabulous.